The threads of human connection weave through our lives in patterns we rarely perceive, until moments of recognition illuminate the intricate tapestry that binds us together. The events that unfolded on a Family Feud stage in November 2024 demonstrated to millions of viewers that seemingly random encounters often carry significance that extends far beyond their immediate circumstances, that gratitude can be expressed years after the moment that warranted it, and that the universe occasionally orchestrates reunions that defy statistical probability while carrying profound emotional and spiritual weight. When 36-year-old Dr. James Mitchell walked onto the Family Feud stage as part of the competing Richardson family team, he recognized Steve Harvey immediately. The recognition was inevitable given Steve's prominence in entertainment. What Steve Harvey could not have anticipated was that standing before him was a man who had saved his life during a medical emergency 10 years earlier, a man whose skilled intervention during a critical moment had allowed Steve to continue his career, his family relationships, and his impact on millions of viewers. The revelation would emerge not through dramatic announcement, but through a simple answer to a game show question, creating a moment of recognition that would halt production and transform both men's understanding of how their lives had intersected. This narrative extends beyond the boundaries of coincidence and chance encounter. It represents an exploration of how our actions ripple through time in ways we cannot predict, how professional competence in critical moments creates lasting impact, and how expressions of gratitude, even when delayed by years and circumstances, carry transformative power for both giver and receiver. James Mitchell's path to medicine began in childhood, shaped by personal experiences that created both motivation and purpose. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio, James witnessed firsthand the disparities in healthcare access and quality that affected communities with limited resources. His father had suffered a heart attack when James was 12 years old, and the delay in receiving appropriate care due to lack of insurance and limited access to quality facilities had left lasting impressions on the young James about the critical importance of timely medical intervention. The experience catalyzed James's determination to pursue medicine. He excelled academically throughout high school, earned a full scholarship to Ohio State University, and subsequently gained admission to Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine. His focus throughout his medical training remained consistent. He wanted to work in emergency medicine where he could provide immediate, critical care to patients in their most vulnerable moments, regardless of their ability to pay or their social circumstances. After completing his residency in emergency medicine, James accepted a position at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The decision to move to Los Angeles represented both a professional opportunity and a personal challenge. The high-volume emergency department at Cedars-Sinai provided exposure to complex cases and cutting-edge protocols, but it also meant leaving behind the familiar environment of Cleveland and the support network of family and friends who had sustained him through years of demanding education and training. The events that would later intersect with Family Feud occurred on a September evening in 2014. James had been working at Cedars-Sinai for approximately 18 months, still adjusting to the intensity and pace of the emergency department while building confidence in his clinical decision-making abilities. The evening had been typically busy, with the usual mix of trauma cases, chest pain evaluations, and acute medical conditions that characterized Los Angeles emergency medicine. At approximately 11:30 the evening, paramedics brought in a patient experiencing severe chest pain and shortness of breath. The patient was a 57-year-old male, presenting with classic symptoms of acute coronary syndrome. The initial assessment suggested a significant cardiac event was in progress, and immediate intervention would be necessary to prevent permanent heart damage or death. The patient was Steve Harvey, though James did not recognize him at the time. Steve had been experiencing increasing chest discomfort throughout the evening but had initially dismissed it as indigestion or stress. By the time the symptoms became impossible to ignore, he was in the early stages of a heart attack. The decision to call emergency services and the rapid response by paramedics had likely saved his life, but the critical interventions that would occur in the emergency department would determine the extent of damage and his long-term prognosis. James, as the attending emergency physician, immediately recognized the severity of the situation. He ordered appropriate diagnostic tests, initiated treatment protocols for acute myocardial infarction, and consulted with the cardiology team for potential cardiac catheterization. The decisions made in those first critical minutes, the medications administered, and the coordination between emergency medicine and cardiology represented the difference between a good outcome and a catastrophic one. The cardiac catheterization revealed significant blockage in a major coronary artery. The interventional cardiologist placed a stent, restoring blood flow and preventing further damage to the heart muscle. Steve Harvey spent several days in the cardiac intensive care unit before being discharged with medications, lifestyle modification recommendations, and follow-up appointments. The medical team had successfully managed a life-threatening emergency, and Steve would go on to make a full recovery. During the entire emergency department encounter, James had no idea he was treating Steve Harvey. Several factors contributed to this lack of recognition. First, James was focused entirely on the medical emergency at hand. When managing a potentially fatal cardiac event, attention remains concentrated on vital signs, test results, and treatment protocols rather than on patient identity. Second, Steve was in significant distress, not appearing as he would during television tapings with professional styling and makeup. Third, James, while aware of Steve Harvey as a cultural figure, was not a regular viewer of his shows and would not necessarily have recognized him outside of his professional entertainment context. Steve, for his part, was too ill and frightened to focus on anything beyond his symptoms and survival. He later recalled very little of the emergency department experience beyond fragments of medical personnel moving around him, the discomfort of various procedures, and the overwhelming fear that he might die without having said goodbye to his family. After Steve's discharge from the hospital, his representatives handled follow-up care arrangements and coordinated with the medical team. Steve sent a general thank you note to the emergency department and cardiology team, but there was no specific communication between Steve and James. In the years that followed, Steve became vigilant about his cardiac health, working with cardiologists to manage his risk factors and making lifestyle modifications that would prevent future events. He occasionally mentioned in interviews that he had experienced a cardiac event years earlier, but he did not provide details about the specific circumstances or the medical team involved. James continued his work in emergency medicine, treating thousands of patients in the years following Steve's case. Individual patients rarely remained in his memory beyond the immediate clinical encounter unless there were unusual circumstances or complications. Steve's case had been serious, but ultimately successful, and it blended into the continuum of critical interventions that characterized James's professional life. 10 years after that September evening, James Mitchell had married and started a family. His wife Angela was from a large, close-knit family, and her relatives, the Richardsons, had long harbored an interest in appearing on Family Feud. When a spot became available and they needed a fifth family member to complete their team, Angela suggested James. He had married into the family 3 years earlier and had developed strong relationships with his in-laws, making him an appropriate addition to their team. James agreed to participate, viewing it as an opportunity to share a fun experience with his extended family and perhaps win some money that could support his children's education funds. He looked forward to meeting Steve Harvey, whom he now watched regularly and whose comedy and hosting style he appreciated. It never occurred to him to connect Steve Harvey, the television host, with the patient he had treated a decade earlier in a busy emergency department. The contexts were so different, and so many patients had been treated in the intervening years that the connection simply did not register in his consciousness. Steve Harvey carried gratitude for the medical team that had saved his life during his cardiac event. He had made lifestyle changes, maintained regular cardiology follow-up, and appreciated every day as a gift made possible by skilled medical intervention at a critical moment. However, like many patients who experience emergency medical care, his memory of the specific individuals involved was fragmentary. He remembered the cardiologist who had placed the stent. He had vague recollections of emergency department personnel, but he could not have identified by name or face the emergency physician who had made the initial critical decisions that set his treatment on the right course. This lack of specific memory was not unusual. Patients in medical crisis often have impaired memory formation due to pain, fear, medications, and the physiological effects of their conditions. The faces and names of medical personnel blur together, and gratitude, while deeply felt, often lacks a specific recipient beyond the institution or department that provided care. Neither James nor Steve had any awareness that they would be reunited on the Family Feud stage. James knew he would meet Steve Harvey, the television host. Steve knew he would be hosting a family from Southern California. The stage was set for a recognition that would emerge organically through the natural progression of the game itself. The Richardson family brought enthusiastic energy to the Family Feud stage. Angela's parents, siblings, and James formed a cohesive team with good chemistry and obvious affection for one another. Steve Harvey, as was his custom, engaged with the family during the introduction segment, asking about their occupations and interests. When Steve reached James, he asked what James did for a living. James responded that he was an emergency medicine physician at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Steve reacted with the warm appreciation he typically showed for medical professionals, making a joke about doctors being the real heroes, while he just told jokes for a living. The exchange was pleasant, but unremarkable, and the game began. The Richardson family and their opponents, the Walsh family from Arizona, traded rounds throughout the first portion of the game. James proved to be a solid contributor, answering questions accurately and demonstrating quick thinking. Steve engaged with him several times, asking follow-up questions about emergency medicine and expressing genuine interest in the work. During one exchange, Steve mentioned that he had once been an emergency room patient himself, describing it as a scary experience that gave him tremendous respect for emergency personnel. James responded that emergency departments served everyone who walked through the doors, regardless of circumstances, and that this universality of care was one of the aspects of the specialty he found most meaningful. The conversation remained general. Steve did not provide specific details about his cardiac event, and James did not probe for information beyond polite engagement. The moment contained potential recognition, but the connection remained unmade. The Richardson family accumulated enough points to advance to fast money. James and his father-in-law, Robert, were selected to participate. Robert went first, achieving a respectable score of 148 points. This meant James needed only 52 points to secure the $20,000 prize for the family. Steve Harvey approached James at the fast money podium with his characteristic energy and humor. He went through the standard setup, explaining the rules and encouraging James to answer quickly with his first instinct. The first 4 questions proceeded normally, with James providing solid answers that earned points without being spectacular. Then Steve asked the 5th and final question. Name something a doctor might tell you that would change your life. James paused for only a moment before answering. His response was spoken clearly and directly. You had a heart attack. The specificity of the answer was notable. Most contestants might have responded with more generic answers like, you're pregnant, or you have cancer. James's choice reflected his professional experience with cardiac emergencies and the profound impact such diagnoses have on patients' lives. As James gave his answer, something shifted in Steve Harvey's expression. The camera captured a moment of confusion, followed by dawning realization. Steve stared at James with an intensity that transcended the normal host-contestant dynamic. The usual patter and jokes that characterized Steve's hosting style evaporated as he processed what he was experiencing. Steve's mind raced through calculations of probability and memory. Emergency medicine physician. Cedars-Sinai. The specific wording of the answer about heart attacks. The time frame aligned with his own cardiac event 10 years earlier. Could this actually be the doctor who had treated him during the most frightening night of his life? The moment stretched beyond comfortable television timing. The audience sensed that something unusual was happening. The Richardson family watched with confusion as Steve stood frozen, staring at James with an expression that combined shock, confusion, and something approaching recognition. Steve spoke, his voice lacking its usual performance quality and carrying instead a genuine note of uncertainty and wonder. He asked James directly whether he had worked in the Cedars-Sinai Emergency Department 10 years earlier, in September of 2014. James confirmed that he had. His own confusion was evident in his expression. He had no framework for understanding why Steve Harvey was asking him about his work schedule from a decade earlier. Steve's next question carried more weight. He asked whether James remembered treating a 57-year-old male patient who came in with a heart attack on a September evening in 2014. He asked whether James remembered making the initial assessment, ordering the cardiac catheterization, and coordinating with the cardiology team. The specificity of the questions triggered James's memory. He remembered the case, not perfectly, but in outline. He remembered a middle-aged male patient with acute coronary syndrome, remembered the urgency of the situation, remembered the successful intervention that had prevented what could have been a fatal outcome. But he had not known the patient's identity. The recognition finally crystallized for James. He looked at Steve Harvey, now 57 years old and standing in obvious good health before him, and understood that he was looking at the patient whose life he had helped save 10 years earlier. The patient he remembered treating in the emergency department was Steve Harvey. Both men stood in stunned silence as the full weight of the recognition settled over them. For Steve, the moment represented the extraordinary gift of being able to thank, face to face and by name, the person whose skill and quick thinking had saved his life. For James, the moment represented the rare opportunity to see long-term outcome for a patient he had treated during a critical emergency, to know with certainty that his intervention had made a profound difference. The audience remained silent, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. The Richardson family stood in confused observation, not yet understanding the full significance of the exchange. The production crew watched from the control booth, aware that they were witnessing something unprecedented in the show's history. Steve Harvey's eyes filled with tears. James Mitchell's expression reflected a complex mixture of surprise, professional satisfaction, and personal emotion. The game show context fell away entirely, leaving two men confronting the profound reality that their lives had intersected at a critical moment and that they had been reunited through circumstances that defied rational probability. Steve Harvey signaled to the production team to stop the cameras. This marked the second time in recent months that he had halted a Family Feud taping for a matter of profound human significance, following his decision to stop production when Marcus Thompson had encountered his estranged daughter in the audience. The production team complied immediately, recognizing from Steve's demeanor that this situation required space and time beyond what normal television production allowed. Steve asked James to step aside from the podium so they could talk privately. The audience was asked to remain patient while a personal matter was addressed. The Richardson family was briefed by a production assistant about what was occurring. Angela began to cry as she understood that her husband had saved Steve Harvey's life years before either of them had met, before she had even known James existed. In a quiet corner of the stage, Steve Harvey and James Mitchell had a conversation that would prove transformative for both men. Steve spoke first, expressing gratitude that had been carried for 10 years without a specific recipient. He described the terror of that night, the fear of dying without seeing his family again, the disorientation and pain that had characterized the emergency department experience. He described the recovery process, the lifestyle changes he had made, the vigilance with which he now monitored his cardiac health. He told James that he had wanted to thank the emergency department team, but had not known how to identify the specific individuals who had been involved in his care. He had sent a general thank you to the department, but it had never felt adequate to the magnitude of what he owed to the people who had saved his life. Now, standing before James, he could offer specific and personal gratitude to one of those individuals. James listened with the focused attention that characterized his clinical work. He explained that he had no memory of the patient being Steve Harvey, that his focus during the emergency had been entirely on the medical situation rather than on patient identity. He described his general approach to emergency cardiac care, the protocols that guided decision-making, and the team-based nature of emergency medicine, where successful outcomes resulted from coordinated effort across multiple specialties. He expressed that seeing Steve healthy and thriving 10 years later provided a rare gift for an emergency physician. Most patients treated in the emergency department were never seen again by the physicians who cared for them in crisis. Outcomes remained unknown unless patients returned for complications. To see, definitively, that a critical intervention had resulted in a patient living a full, productive, meaningful life represented professional satisfaction of a type rarely experienced. Steve asked James about the decision-making process during that critical night. He wanted to understand what James had been thinking, what factors had guided his clinical choices, what training and experience had prepared him to handle such a situation effectively. James explained the pattern recognition that comes with experience, the protocols designed to minimize variation in care, quality, the importance of rapid diagnostic assessment, and immediate treatment initiation for acute cardiac events. He described the teamwork between emergency medicine and cardiology, the way successful outcomes in critical situations depend on coordinated effort rather than individual heroism. He named the interventional cardiologist who had placed the stent, suggesting that Steve's gratitude should extend to that specialist as well. He emphasized that his own role, while important, had been one part of a larger system designed to provide optimal care for life-threatening emergencies. Steve listened intently, gaining understanding of the complex coordination and expert knowledge that had saved his life. He expressed that while he appreciated James's emphasis on teamwork, the initial decisions made in the emergency department had been critical to his survival. Without appropriate recognition of the cardiac event's severity, without immediate initiation of proper treatment protocols, without skilled coordination with cardiology, the outcome could have been drastically different. James acknowledged this reality while maintaining his characteristic humility. He explained that his training and the institutional systems at Cedars-Sinai had prepared him to provide that level of care. He expressed that every patient deserved that standard of care, regardless of their identity or circumstances, and that Steve's case, while personally meaningful in retrospect, had been handled according to the same protocols applied to every patient presenting with acute coronary syndrome. The conversation shifted to address the extraordinary nature of their reunion. Both men acknowledged that the statistical probability of this encounter approached zero. The likelihood that a patient and the emergency physician, who treated him during a life-threatening event, would be reunited 10 years later, on a game show stage, with the recognition emerging organically through a question about doctors changing lives, defied rational calculation. Steve, who frequently spoke about his faith and his belief in divine providence, expressed his conviction that their reunion had been orchestrated by forces beyond coincidence. He believed that he was meant to have this opportunity to express gratitude, that James was meant to receive affirmation of the lasting impact of his work, and that their story was meant to be witnessed by millions of viewers as a testament to the value of medical professionals and the interconnectedness of human lives. James, more reserved in his expression of spirituality, but no less moved by the moment, acknowledged that the reunion felt significant beyond mere chance. He expressed that medicine had taught him humility about the limits of scientific explanation and openness to dimensions of human experience that transcended purely material causation. Whether one attributed their reunion to divine intervention or extraordinary coincidence, the emotional and spiritual impact remained profound. Steve asked James what he could do to properly thank him for saving his life. James responded that seeing Steve healthy and continuing his work, his family relationships, and his positive impact on others constituted thanks enough. He explained that the greatest satisfaction in emergency medicine came from knowing that patients were able to return to their lives and their purposes because of successful medical intervention. Steve insisted that some form of concrete expression of gratitude was appropriate. He offered to make a substantial donation to Cedars-Sinai in James's name. He offered to support James's work in any way that might be meaningful. He offered to use his platform to advocate for emergency medicine and for the importance of cardiac health awareness. James suggested that if Steve wanted to honor the care he had received, he might consider supporting programs that provided emergency medical care to underserved communities. He described the disparities in access to quality emergency care that persisted across socioeconomic and geographic lines. He expressed that his own motivation for pursuing medicine had been shaped by his father's experience with delayed cardiac care due to lack of resources, and that addressing these disparities remained a central concern in his professional life. Steve immediately committed to working with his foundation to support emergency medicine programs in underserved areas. He committed to using his platform to promote cardiac health awareness, particularly in communities where risk factors were high and access to quality care was limited. He committed to telling the story of his cardiac event and the excellent care he had received as a way of encouraging others to seek immediate medical attention for cardiac symptoms and to support the medical professionals who provide critical care. After approximately 45 minutes of private conversation, Steve and James returned to the stage. The audience, which had remained remarkably patient, erupted in applause as they emerged. Steve addressed the audience and explained, in broad terms, what had occurred. He described his cardiac event 10 years earlier, explained that James had been the emergency physician who treated him, and expressed his profound gratitude for the unexpected opportunity to thank James directly. He made a decision to share this story publicly, with James's permission, believing that it carried value beyond personal significance. The story could promote awareness about cardiac health, encourage people to seek immediate care for cardiac symptoms, honor the work of emergency medical professionals, and demonstrate the lasting impact of skilled medical intervention. James stood quietly as Steve spoke, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding the potential value of sharing the story. When Steve finished his explanation, the audience stood in spontaneous ovation, not for entertainment value, but in genuine recognition of the extraordinary nature of what they had witnessed. The matter of the game still required resolution. The fifth answer in James's fast money round had been, "You had a heart attack," and it needed to be revealed whether this answer appeared on the survey. The moment carried additional weight now that everyone understood the personal significance of James's response. Steve revealed the answer, with visible emotion. "You had a heart attack" was indeed on the board, worth 34 points. Combined with James's previous answers, the Richardson family had achieved the necessary 200 points to win the $20,000. But the monetary prize had become almost incidental to the emotional and spiritual significance of what had occurred. Steve handed James the prize check, but he also made an additional announcement. His foundation would be matching the $20,000 and directing the combined $40,000 to Cedars-Sinai Emergency Department to support continuing education and professional development for emergency medicine staff. He would also be establishing a fund to support emergency medical care access in underserved communities, with James serving as an advisor to ensure the funds were directed effectively. When the episode featuring the Richardson family aired 8 weeks after the taping, it became the highest-rated Family Feud episode in the show's history. The moment when Steve recognized James as the doctor who had saved his life was viewed and shared millions of times across social media platforms. News outlets picked up the story, featuring it in human interest segments that emphasized themes of gratitude, divine timing, and the value of medical professionals. The response from viewers was overwhelmingly emotional. Many people shared their own stories of medical emergencies and the healthcare professionals who had saved their lives. Emergency medicine physicians across the country reported receiving thank you messages from former patients who had been inspired by the story to reach out with gratitude they had never expressed. The episode sparked conversations about the invisible impact of medical work and the importance of expressing appreciation to healthcare providers whose interventions often save lives without acknowledgement. James found his life significantly changed by the public recognition of his role in Steve Harvey's survival. He received numerous speaking invitations from medical schools, residency programs, and healthcare conferences. He used these opportunities to discuss the rewards and challenges of emergency medicine, the importance of systematic protocols in ensuring quality care, and the professional satisfaction that comes from successful interventions in critical situations. He emphasized in these presentations that his case represented the work of countless emergency medicine physicians who made similar decisions daily without recognition or public acknowledgement. He worked to shift attention from himself as an individual to emergency medicine as a specialty, and to the systemic factors that enabled quality emergency care. He advocated for increased support for emergency departments, better working conditions for emergency medicine staff, and greater investment in training programs that prepared physicians to handle critical situations effectively. The financial support from Steve Harvey's foundation allowed Cedars-Sinai to enhance its continuing education programs for emergency medicine staff. James played an active role in developing curricula focused on cardiac emergency protocols, team-based care coordination, and communication skills for interacting with patients during crises. The programs became models that were adopted by other institutions seeking to improve emergency care quality. James also became involved in Steve Harvey's initiative to support emergency medical care access in underserved communities. He consulted on program design, helped identify high-need areas, and worked to ensure that funding was directed toward interventions with proven effectiveness. His medical expertise combined with his personal connection to the story gave him credibility and influence in shaping how resources were deployed. Steve Harvey's use of his platform to promote cardiac health awareness and emergency medicine support created measurable impact. He featured cardiac health experts on his talk show, discussing risk factors, warning signs, and the importance of immediate response to cardiac symptoms. He shared his own story in detail, describing both the medical experience and his subsequent lifestyle modifications. Public health officials noted increases in emergency department visits for cardiac symptoms in the months following the episode's airing, suggesting that Steve's story had encouraged people to seek care rather than ignoring potentially serious symptoms. While increased emergency department utilization created challenges for already strained systems, the earlier identification and treatment of cardiac events likely prevented deaths and reduced the severity of outcomes for many patients. Steve's foundation partnership with James to support emergency care access in underserved communities resulted in concrete programs. Mobile cardiac screening units were deployed in areas with limited healthcare access. Training programs were established to increase the number of emergency medicine physicians willing to work in underserved settings. Telemedicine consultation services were developed to connect rural emergency departments with cardiac specialists for guidance during critical situations. Steve frequently mentioned in interviews and public appearances that his reunion with James had reinforced his sense of purpose and gratitude. He described feeling that his survival 10 years earlier had been made possible not just by medical skill, but by divine intention that he continue his work and use his platform for positive impact. The reunion served as reminder and motivation to maximize the value of the years he had been given. The story of Steve Harvey and James Mitchell became a cultural reference point for discussions about gratitude, professional impact, and the interconnectedness of human lives. It was referenced in sermons, motivational speeches, and educational settings as an example of how our actions ripple through time in ways we cannot predict or perceive. Medical schools incorporated the story into discussions about professional satisfaction and the long-term impact of medical work. Faculty used it to illustrate for students that while they might not often receive direct thanks or witness long-term outcomes for patients they treated in emergency settings, their work created lasting value that extended far beyond immediate clinical encounters. The story also influenced conversations about recognition and appreciation for healthcare workers. Multiple initiatives emerged, encouraging patients to reach out to medical professionals who had provided significant care, even years after the fact. Hospitals and healthcare systems developed programs to facilitate this kind of feedback, recognizing that expressions of gratitude contributed to healthcare worker satisfaction and resilience against burnout. Steve Harvey and James Mitchell maintained contact following their reunion. Steve attended fundraising events for Cedars-Sinai and used his presence to support the hospital's development efforts. James appeared on Steve's talk show to discuss emergency medicine and cardiac health. Their relationship evolved from patient and physician to collaborators in promoting healthcare access and cardiac health awareness. The relationship remained grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose rather than in celebrity or media attention. Steve valued James's medical expertise and his commitment to serving underserved communities. James valued Steve's willingness to use his platform to amplify important public health messages and to support concrete programs that addressed healthcare disparities. They collaborated on educational content about cardiac health that was distributed through Steve's media channels and reached millions of viewers who might not otherwise encounter such information. The content was developed with medical accuracy as the priority, while incorporating Steve's communication style to maximize accessibility and engagement. The story of Steve Harvey and James Mitchell offers multiple interconnected lessons about gratitude, professional impact, and the significance of seemingly ordinary moments. The first lesson concerns the lasting impact of professional competence exercised during critical moments. James had treated Steve according to established protocols and standard care procedures. He had not performed heroic individual actions, but had rather executed his professional responsibilities with skill and efficiency. Yet, this competent performance of professional duties during a critical window had enabled Steve Harvey to continue living, working, and impacting millions of people. The story illustrates that excellence in professional work, particularly in fields that serve others during vulnerable moments, creates value that extends far beyond immediate transactions or encounters. The second lesson addresses the importance of expressing Gratitude, even when delayed by time and circumstances. Steve had carried gratitude for 10 years, without a specific recipient for that gratitude. The reunion allowed him to express appreciation directly to one of the individuals responsible for his survival. The expression of gratitude provided emotional closure for Steve and meaningful affirmation for James. The lesson suggests that gratitude unexpressed leaves both the grateful and the worthy of gratitude incomplete, and that efforts to identify and thank those who have made significant positive impacts on our lives carry value even years after the original events. The third lesson explores the interconnectedness of human lives and the way our actions influence others in ways we cannot perceive. James had no knowledge that the patient he treated in the emergency department would become a regular presence in his home through television programming, would employ his wife's family member's cousin, or would eventually reunite with him on a game show stage. The choices he made during his training, his decision to pursue emergency medicine, his skill development through years of practice, all positioned him to be the right person in the right place, with the right skills to save Steve Harvey's life. Similarly, Steve had no knowledge that the emergency physician who saved his life would later marry into a family that would appear on his show. The lesson illuminates the profound ways our lives intersect and influence one another through chains of causation we rarely perceive. The fourth lesson concerns the appropriate use of platforms and resources. Steve's response to the reunion was not simply emotional expression, but concrete action to support emergency medicine and healthcare access. He leveraged his financial resources, his media platform, and his public profile to create programs that would extend the kind of life-saving care he had received to others who might not otherwise have access to it. The lesson demonstrates that gratitude finds its highest expression, not in words alone, but in actions that honor the values and work of those we wish to thank. The fifth lesson addresses humility and the recognition of systemic factors in individual success. James consistently emphasized that his successful treatment of Steve resulted from training, protocols, institutional support, and teamwork rather than individual heroism. This humility served multiple purposes. It honored the contributions of others involved in Steve's care. It emphasized that quality outcomes in emergency medicine result from systems and training rather than from exceptional individuals. It directed attention and resources toward systemic improvements rather than toward individual recognition. The lesson suggests that true professional excellence includes the wisdom to recognize and acknowledge the broader context that enables individual effectiveness. Several years after their reunion on the Family Feud stage, both Steve, Harvey, and James Mitchell continue the work that has defined their lives. Steve continues hosting Family Feud and his other entertainment projects while dedicating significant time and resources to his foundation's healthcare access initiatives. He speaks regularly about the importance of cardiac health awareness and the value of immediate response to concerning symptoms. James continues practicing emergency medicine at Cedars-Sinai, while taking on additional responsibilities related to medical education and healthcare access advocacy. He trains the next generation of emergency physicians, emphasizing both technical excellence and recognition of the profound impact of their work. He continues advising healthcare access programs that extend quality emergency care to underserved communities. Their reunion and subsequent collaboration has created ripples that continue to spread. The emergency medicine residents James trains carry forward his emphasis on excellence in service. Healthcare access programs they have supported provide care to thousands of patients who might otherwise have delayed or foregone treatment. The public awareness campaigns have encouraged countless individuals to seek appropriate care for cardiac symptoms, potentially saving lives across the country. The story of Steve Harvey and James Mitchell demonstrates the profound truth that our lives intersect in ways we rarely perceive and that our actions create impacts that extend far beyond our awareness. A young doctor treating a patient in an emergency department could not have known he was ensuring the continuation of a career that brought joy and inspiration to millions. A television host, saved by skilled medical intervention, could not have known that he would reunite with his physician in circumstances that would allow expression of gratitude and creation of programs extending that life-saving care to others. The recognition that emerged through a simple answer to a game show question illuminated a connection that had existed for 10 years without either party's awareness. The moment of recognition transformed both men's understanding of how their lives had intersected and created opportunities for gratitude, expression, professional affirmation, and collaborative action that honored the significance of their original encounter. For viewers who witnessed the reunion through the television broadcast, the story provided multiple sources of meaning and inspiration. It demonstrated the value of medical professionals who serve patients during their most vulnerable moments. It illustrated the appropriate expression of gratitude through both words and concrete actions. It revealed the extraordinary ways human lives intersect and influence one another. It showed how individuals with platforms and resources can leverage those advantages to create positive social impact. The cameras captured the moment when Steve Harvey froze in recognition, when he realized that standing before him was the man who had saved his life 10 years earlier. They captured the tears, the embrace, the raw emotion of two men confronting the profound reality of their interconnection. They captured Steve's expression of gratitude and James's humble acceptance. They captured the transformation of a game show moment into something approaching sacred recognition of the value of human life and the impact of human service. Years after that moment, the story continues to resonate because it touches fundamental aspects of human experience. We all carry gratitude for those who have helped us during critical moments. We all hope that our professional work and our service to others creates lasting value. We all wonder about the ways our lives intersect with others without our knowledge. We all seek meaning in the patterns that emerge when we look back across our lives and see the threads that connect seemingly random events. The reunion of Steve Harvey and James Mitchell on the Family Feud stage provided a glimpse into these deeper patterns, a momentary illumination of the intricate tapestry of human connection that underlies our daily experiences. It reminded millions of viewers that life is precious, that skilled professionals make our continued existence possible during critical moments, that gratitude should be expressed rather than merely felt, and that we are far more connected to one another than we typically recognize. The story ends not with conclusions, but with ongoing work. Steve continues using his platform to promote health awareness and support healthcare access. James continues providing excellent emergency care and training the next generation of emergency physicians. The programs they have supported continue serving communities with limited access to emergency care. The awareness raised by their story continues encouraging individuals to seek appropriate care for cardiac symptoms. Most significantly, the story continues in the lives Steve Harvey has been able to touch during the years since his cardiac event, years made possible by James Mitchell's skill and training. Every laugh Steve has generated, every family he has hosted on Family Feud, every inspirational message he has delivered, every charitable initiative he has supported, all exist because an emergency physician recognized a life-threatening situation and responded with competent, skilled, immediate intervention. This is the ultimate lesson of their reunion. Our actions matter in ways we cannot fully comprehend. Our professional competence during critical moments creates value that ripples across years and touches lives we will never know about. And occasionally, through circumstances that defy probability, we are given the gift of recognition, the opportunity to see clearly the impact we have created, to receive gratitude for service rendered, and to understand that our lives are far more interconnected and significant than we typically perceive. The narrative incorporates multiple strategic emotional peaks throughout the structure, including the moment of recognition, the private conversation, and the public acknowledgement. Universal themes of gratitude, professional impact, and human interconnectedness resonate across demographic boundaries. The story creates reflection opportunities, encouraging audiences to consider expressing delayed gratitude, recognizing professional impacts, and understanding interconnectedness. Memorable wisdom moments emerge from both Steve's gratitude expression and James's professional humility. The opening and closing create meaningful narrative bookends, reinforcing themes of connection and lasting impact. The medical emergency is presented accurately, with appropriate clinical terminology and realistic protocols. The story avoids sensationalizing the cardiac event or creating artificial drama from medical crisis. James is presented as competent and humble, rather than as individual hero. The emphasis on systemic factors, training, and teamwork provides realistic portrayal of emergency medicine. Steve's gratitude expression is genuine rather than performative. The focus on concrete actions to support healthcare access demonstrates appropriate use of platform and resources. Educational value about cardiac health and emergency medicine is integrated naturally. The narrative promotes appreciation for healthcare workers without requiring crisis or tragedy as narrative foundation.